I'm Pauline, 61 years old, and for 33 years, my son Thomas was my entire world. After losing my husband, I dedicated everything to giving Thomas the best life possible. I never imagined the day of his wedding would become the most heartbreaking and empowering moment of my life. What happened when my future daughter-in-law publicly humiliated me changed everything. Before I share my story, where are you watching from today? If you enjoy stories about standing up for yourself in shocking family situations, please hit that like and subscribe button. After losing my husband Michael to a sudden heart attack when Thomas was just 8 years old, I found myself a single mother with a heartbroken little boy. Michael had been my high school sweetheart, and his death left a void in our lives that seemed impossible to fill. However, I was determined to give Thomas everything he needed, despite our loss. I threw myself into my career as a financial advisor, working extra hours and taking on additional clients to ensure we maintained financial stability. Within 5 years, I had built a reputation that allowed me to work with high-profile clients, and our financial situation became quite comfortable. This meant I could provide Thomas with a good education and opportunities without constantly worrying about money. Thomas was always a bright child with a natural curiosity about the world. Even as a young boy, he showed exceptional skills with computers and mathematics. His teachers often commented on his kind nature and willingness to help classmates who struggled with difficult concepts. He had his father's gentle eyes and warm smile, which made it impossible for me to ever stay upset with him for long. We developed special traditions that kept us connected. Every Sunday morning, we would make pancakes together, experimenting with different ingredients and toppings. On the anniversary of his father's death, we would visit the beach where we had scattered Michael's ashes and share stories about him. These rituals helped Thomas maintain a connection to his father while strengthening our mother-son bond. When Thomas left for college to study computer science, I was both proud and terrified. While other parents worried about their kids partying too much, I worried about Thomas being lonely. He had always been somewhat introverted, preferring a few close friends to large social circles. To my relief, he thrived academically and made several good friends who shared his passion for programming. During his college years, Thomas began asserting his independence more clearly. He would sometimes go weeks without calling, and when he came home for holidays, he spent more time with friends than with me. Though it hurt a little, I recognized this as a healthy part of his development and tried not to take it personally. After graduating with honors, Thomas landed a position at a prestigious software company. I helped him furnish his first apartment and offered financial advice as he navigated adult life. It brought me joy to see him succeed, knowing how proud his father would have been. 4 years into his career, during a technology conference in San Francisco, Thomas met Kayla. According to him, they connected instantly when they were seated next to each other during a keynote presentation. Kayla worked as a marketing executive for a competing company, and Thomas was impressed by her industry knowledge and ambition. When he first brought Kayla home to meet me, I tried to be welcoming. She was undeniably beautiful, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes. She charmed me with questions about my work and complimented my home decor. Yet something about her felt performative, as if she was acting a part rather than being genuine. In those early days, Thomas was completely smitten. He would call me just to share something funny or impressive that Kayla had said or done. I had never seen him so infatuated with anyone before, and while I was happy to see his joy, I also noticed how quickly he began changing his habits and preferences to align with hers. Within weeks of dating, Kayla Thomas began canceling our regular Sunday dinners. He stopped watching the sci-fi shows he had always loved because Kayla found them childish. He even adopted new speech patterns and phrases that mirrored hers. These changes were subtle at first, but as his mother, I noticed them immediately. I tried to dismiss my concerns as the natural worries of a mother seeing her son build a life that increasingly excluded her. But looking back, those early warning signs were the first indication of the storm that would eventually engulf us all. As Thomas and Kayla's relationship intensified, I began noticing more significant changes in my son. 6 months into their relationship, they decided to move in together, a decision that seemed rushed to me. When I gently suggested they might want to know each other longer before such a commitment, Thomas became defensively saying, "Mom, when you know, Dad proposed to you after 8 months, remember?" Kayla gradually took control of Thomas's schedule, often speaking for him when we made plans. "We can't make it to dinner this Sunday, Pauline. Thomas has a work project, and I need him to help me shop for new furniture." Whenever I suggested one-on-one time with my son, there was always some reason why Kayla needed to be included, or why Thomas couldn't come at all. During the few family gatherings Kayla attended, I noticed how she would subtly undermine me. When I served Thomas his favorite childhood dish, she remarked, "Oh, Thomas doesn't eat that anymore. It's too heavy on carbs." When I mentioned a funny memory from Thomas's childhood, she'd cut in with, "Thomas has grown up so much since then. He's a completely different person now." Despite these tensions, I tried to maintain my relationship with Thomas. I'd send him text messages throughout the week, sharing jokes or articles I thought would interest him. His responses became increasingly delayed and brief. When we did speak on the phone, I could often hear Kayla in the background asking who he was talking to or telling him they needed to leave for something. 11 months into their relationship, Thomas called me on a Wednesday evening. "Mom, I have amazing news," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "I proposed to Kayla last night, and she said yes." I felt my heart sink, but forced enthusiasm into my voice as I congratulated him. When I asked about the suddenness, he explained that Kayla's ideal venue had a cancellation for the following summer, and they needed to book quickly. 2 weeks later, Thomas visited me alone for the first time in months. As we sat in my kitchen, he seemed nervous, fidgeting with his coffee mug. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the wedding," he began. "Kayla and I have been looking at venues and planning things out, and, well, weddings are really expensive nowadays." I listened as Thomas explained that between the venue catering, flowers, photography, and Kayla's vision for her dream day, they were looking at costs upwards of $90,000. "We've saved some, and Kayla's parents are contributing $15,000, but we're still short," he explained, looking uncomfortable. Despite my reservations about their relationship, I couldn't bear to disappoint my son. "How much do you need?" I asked. The amount he mentioned, $75,000, was substantial, but thanks to my career and careful saving, it was something I could afford. I agreed to cover it, telling myself it was worth it to see my only child happy on his special day. Once the money was transferred to their joint account, I expected to be included in the wedding planning. Instead, I found myself increasingly sidelined. When I asked about attending dress shopping with Kayla and her mother, I was told they had already gone. When I inquired about the menu tasting, Kayla explained that they could only bring 2 people and her parents had already been promised those spots. "Don't worry about a thing, Pauline," Kayla would say with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Everything is under control. We want you to just enjoy the day as Thomas's mom." During a rare visit to their apartment to drop off some family photos Thomas had requested for a wedding display, I overheard Kayla speaking to one of her bridesmaids in the bedroom. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but the mention of my name caught my attention. "Pauline is such a control freak," Kayla was saying. "She thinks just because she's paying for most of it, she should have input on everything. Thomas doesn't even realize how manipulative she is. Just keep her at arm's length until after the wedding," responded a voice I would later learn belonged to Jessica, Kayla's maid of honor. "Once you're married, you can gradually cut her out more permanently." That's what I did with my mother-in-law. Something about Jessica's voice seemed vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place it. More concerning was how Kayla laughed in response to the suggestion of cutting me out of my son's life. As the wedding date approached, my concerns about Kayla grew. During a dinner at a restaurant where she excused herself to take a phone call, Thomas confided that they had argued because he wanted to include a special dance with me at the reception, a tradition Kayla deemed outdated and unnecessary. I began researching Kayla more thoroughly online. Her social media profiles presented a carefully curated image of success and sophistication, but there were gaps in her history that struck me as odd. Former colleagues and friends from her past were notably absent from her connections. When I mentioned these observations to Thomas, he became immediately defensive. "Mom, why are you stalking my fiancé online? Kayla is private about her past because she had a difficult childhood. I need you to respect that and trust my judgment." His reaction only heightened my suspicions and deepened the growing rift between us. 3 months before the wedding, while researching gift ideas for the couple, I stumbled upon something that changed everything. A social media post from 4 years earlier showed up in a related search. A woman who looked remarkably like Kayla, under the name Catherine Lawrence, was pictured with an older man named David, celebrating their engagement. The caption mentioned their upcoming destination wedding in Bali. My curiosity piqued. I dug deeper. There was no record of a marriage between Catherine Lawrence and David Henderson, but I found a newspaper announcement from 6 months after the engagement photo stating that the wedding had been called off. What caught my attention was a comment from someone named Robert, beneath an archived post. "You took the ring and the car and disappeared. Your true colors finally showed." Using my financial advisor skills and connections, I discreetly investigated further. Catherine Lawrence, who I was now certain was Kayla, had been engaged 3 times in the past 7 years. Each time to wealthy, successful men significantly older than her. Each engagement ended abruptly after expensive gifts were exchanged and wedding plans were well underway. Even more alarming was what I discovered about Kayla's current financial situation. Through a connection at a credit reporting agency, I learned that Kayla had nearly $120,000 in credit card debt spread across multiple accounts. Thomas had mentioned nothing about this, which suggested he was unaware. I spent several sleepless nights debating whether to tell my son. Would he believe me or see it as an attempt to sabotage his relationship? Would presenting this evidence push him further away? The thought of my son being manipulated broke my heart, but I feared losing him completely if I intervened. Ultimately, I decided to speak with Kayla first, hoping she might have explanations that would ease my concerns. I invited her to lunch while Thomas was away on a 2-day business trip. At an upscale restaurant where I knew we wouldn't be interrupted, I carefully broached the subject. "Kayla, I need to ask you about some things I've discovered." I began after our meals arrived. "I know about Catherine Lawrence and your previous engagements. I also know about your financial situation." The transformation in her expression was immediate. The pleasant smile vanished, replaced by cold calculation. She set down her fork carefully. "I wondered when you'd start digging," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You've never approved of me from day one." "That's not true," I countered. "I've only wanted Thomas to be happy. But I can't ignore what I've found. Does Thomas know about your debt, about your history with David and the others?" Kayla leaned forward. "Listen carefully, Pauline. Thomas loves me, not you. He's building a life with me. If you share your little investigation with him, you'll force him to choose between us. Are you prepared for that choice? Because I guarantee you won't like the outcome." "He deserves to know the truth," I insisted, though her confidence shook me. "The truth," she laughed coldly. "The truth is that your son is a grown man who doesn't need his mommy anymore. The truth is that you're so desperate to keep him dependent on you that you'd sabotage his happiness. If you say anything to him, I'll make sure he never speaks to you again." Before I could respond, Kayla stood up, grabbed her purse, and delivered her parting shot. "Stay in your lane, Pauline. The wedding is happening whether you approve or not. Thomas is mine now." That evening, I received a call from Thomas. His voice was strained as he said, "Mom, Kayla told me you had lunch together. She said you accused her of being after my money and tried to convince her to break up with me. How could you do that?" Despite my attempts to explain, Thomas wouldn't listen. "Kayla and I think it's best if you give us some space right now. We're both really hurt by this." "Thomas, please," I began, but he cut me off. "I'll call you in a few days, Mom. I just can't talk about this right now." That call never came. Instead, as the wedding approached, communication dwindled to brief, formal text messages about logistical matters. Despite the distance between us, I continued making payments for the wedding vendors as promised. 6 weeks before the wedding, the invitations arrived in the mail. As I opened the elegant envelope, my eyes immediately went to the portion listing the parents of the bride and groom. Catherine and James Morris, parents of the bride, was printed in beautiful script. But where my name should have been, as mother of the groom, there was nothing. I called Thomas immediately. "The invitation doesn't list me as your mother," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. After an uncomfortable silence, he replied, "Kayla thought it would look unbalanced to have just one parent on my side when she has both of hers. It's just an aesthetic thing, Mom. Don't make this a big deal." I wanted to point out that Kayla had apparently reverted to her birth name for the invitation, but I held my tongue. "Will I still be seated at the family table?" I asked instead. "Of course," Thomas replied quickly. "You're still family." Despite the growing rift and mounting evidence of Kayla's deception, I couldn't bring myself to abandon my son's wedding. I had promised to be there for him always, and I intended to keep that promise. But I also began preparing contingency plans, just in case the situation deteriorated further. I documented all my financial contributions to the wedding and gathered my evidence about Kayla's past in a secure folder. Whatever happened, I needed to be ready to protect my son, even if it meant protecting him from his own decisions. The morning of Thomas's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect June day that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing inside me. I'd barely slept, torn between hope that the day would go smoothly and dread about what might unfold. I dressed carefully in the navy blue dress I'd purchased months ago, applied my makeup to hide the signs of exhaustion, and headed to the luxurious hotel venue I had paid for. As I pulled into the parking lot 3 hours before the ceremony, I noticed increased security at the entrance, something that hadn't been mentioned in any of the planning discussions I'd been included in. When I approached the main doors, a young man in a dark suit stepped forward. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This is a private event. Can I see your invitation?" he asked politely but firmly. "I'm Pauline Wilson, mother of the groom," I explained, reaching into my purse for identification. He consulted a tablet. "I don't see your name on the approved guest list, Ms. Wilson." A cold realization washed over me. There must be a mistake. My son is Thomas Wilson. I've paid for most of this wedding. After an uncomfortable conversation and a call to someone inside, the security guard reluctantly allowed me to enter. "Just to be clear, Ms. Morris specifically requested that you be turned away if you arrived," he said quietly as I passed. Inside, the venue was transformed with white roses, crystal decorations, and twinkling lights, all items from the budget I had approved. As I made my way toward the ceremony space, I could hear the string quartet playing softly. Guests were beginning to arrive, being directed to their seats by ushers. I slipped into the room, intending to take a seat quietly at the back until I could speak with Thomas before the ceremony. Before I could sit down, I heard a shrill voice call out from the doorway behind me. "What are you even doing here? You were uninvited yesterday." Kayla stood in the doorway, already in her wedding gown, a stunning designer creation I had paid for. Her face was contorted with rage, makeup perfect, but expression ugly with anger. The room fell silent as guests turned to stare. "Kayla, I just want to see my son get married," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "Thomas called you yesterday. He told you not to come," she shouted, advancing toward me. "Security, why is she here?" Thomas appeared behind Kayla, his expression a mixture of shock and distress. "Mom, what's going on?" He looked genuinely confused. "Your mother is crashing our wedding after we specifically told her she wasn't welcome," Kayla spat. "She's trying to ruin everything as usual." "I never received any call uninviting me, Thomas," I said, looking directly at my son. "This is the first I'm hearing of it." Thomas looked uncertainly between Kayla and me. "Kayla said you two spoke yesterday and agreed you wouldn't come because of your disagreements." The guests were watching the drama unfold with undisguised interest. Kayla's mother stepped forward, placing a protective arm around her daughter. "Thomas, she's clearly lying. Kayla told us all about the call." I maintained my composure, though inside I was crumbling. My son actually believed I would agree not to attend his wedding. Looking around the room, I noticed one of the bridesmaids watching with an odd expression, not shock or disgust like the others, but something closer to recognition. It was Jessica, the maid of honor I'd heard speaking with Kayla months ago. In that moment, standing humiliated before a room of strangers, while my son looked at me with doubt, I made a decision. The evidence I'd gathered was in my purse. The contact information for Robert Kayla's former fiancé was in my phone. And as luck would have it, he was already in town, having agreed to meet me yesterday after I reached out to him. "I can see I'm not welcome here," I said, my voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "I'll leave as requested, but first I'd like to introduce someone. A special guest I invited. An old friend of Kayla's, or should I say Catherine's." I texted quickly, and within moments, Robert Henderson walked through the door. Tall, distinguished, and carrying a portfolio, he stood beside me with grim determination. When Kayla saw him, the color drained from her face. "What is he doing here?" she whispered, all her bravado suddenly gone. "Hello, Catherine," Robert said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "It's been a while." Thomas looked between Robert and Kayla in confusion. "Who is Catherine? Who is this man, Kayla?" Robert opened his portfolio. "I'm Robert Henderson, your fiancé's former fiancé, one of several actually. I've brought documentation you might find interesting, including receipts for the $100,000 engagement ring she kept after breaking things off, along with the deed to a car I purchased for her." Kayla's face transformed from shock to desperate damage control. "He's lying. I've never seen this man before." "Really?" Jessica stepped forward unexpectedly. "Because I worked at the law firm that handled the cancelled prenup agreement between you two. That's why your voice sounded familiar to me, Pauline. We spoke on the phone once when you called the office looking for Thomas." Chaos erupted in the ceremony space. Guests began whispering loudly. Kayla's parents looked stunned, and Thomas stood frozen, trying to process what was happening. I pulled out my phone and with shaking hands cancelled the remaining payments to the caterer, photographer, and other vendors I had arranged to pay after the ceremony. Then I walked to Thomas, placed my hand on his arm, and said quietly, "I'm sorry it had to happen this way. I only wanted to protect you." The next hour was a blur of confrontations and revelations. The venue manager approached as guests began dispersing, concerned about the remaining balance due. Kayla's parents huddled with her in a corner, their expressions shifting from confusion to anger as they presumably learned the extent of her deception. Thomas pulled me into a quiet anteroom off the main hall. His face was ashen, his wedding day transformed into a nightmare. "Mom, I don't understand what's happening. Is what they're saying true about Kayla being Catherine?" I nodded gently. "Yes, sweetheart. I tried to tell you what I'd discovered, but you didn't want to hear it. She's been engaged multiple times before, always, to successful men, always ending things after receiving expensive gifts. And she has massive debt she's hidden from you." Thomas sank into a chair, loosening his tie as if it were choking him. "The call she claimed you two had yesterday. She made that up." "There was no call," I confirmed. "I think she realized I might present evidence that would stop the wedding, so she tried to prevent me from attending." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with pain and dawning realization. "She's been turning me against you all along, hasn't she? The things she claimed you said about her, the criticisms she said you made behind her back. None of it was true," I said simply. Thomas buried his face in his hands. "I've been such a fool. I believed her over my own mother. I let her push you away. How can you even look at me right now?" I knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in mine. "You're my son. I love you unconditionally. Kayla is very skilled at manipulation. You're not the first person she's deceived, and you won't be the last." Our conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock. The door flew open, and Kayla's father stood there red-faced with anger. "You've ruined my daughter's wedding day with your accusations," he shouted at me. Before I could respond, Thomas stood up. "Mr. Morris, with all due respect, your daughter ruined this wedding by lying to everyone, including me. My mother was only trying to protect me, which is more than I can say for anyone else here. You'll regret this." Mr. Morris threatened, pointing a finger at me. We paid $15,000 toward this wedding. And my mother paid $75,000, Thomas replied firmly, which she's now cancelled because your daughter attempted to bar her from attending after taking her money. I'd say that makes us more than even. After Mr. Morris stormed off, Thomas and I gathered our belongings. As we headed toward the exit, Kayla intercepted us, her mascara streaked with tears. "Thomas, please," she begged, grabbing his arm. "Don't leave like this. Everything they're saying is twisted and exaggerated. I love you. We can still make this work." For a moment, I feared Thomas might waver. The pull of a relationship, even a toxic one, can be powerful. But he gently removed her hand from his arm. "It's over, Kayla, or Catherine, or whatever your real name is. I don't know you at all, and I never did." As we walked to our cars, Kayla called out one final desperate attempt. "You'll never find anyone who loves you like I do." Thomas turned to her with sad certainty. "That's exactly what I'm counting on." The days following the wedding that wasn't were extraordinarily difficult for Thomas. He moved temporarily into my guest room, unable to face returning to the apartment he had shared with Kayla. The embarrassment of cancelling the wedding was compounded by the humiliating circumstances and the knowledge that 80 guests had witnessed the dramatic revelation. "I keep replaying every moment of our relationship," he confessed one evening as we sat on my patio. "There were so many red flags I ignored. The way she isolated me from friends, how she always had emergencies when I planned to see you, the inconsistencies in her stories about her past. Don't be too hard on yourself," I urged. "Love makes us all vulnerable to manipulation. What matters is that you recognize the truth when it was presented to you." The full extent of Kayla's deception became clearer in the following weeks. Thomas discovered she had opened credit cards in his name, accumulating nearly $20,000 in debt. With my background in financial planning, I helped him dispute the fraudulent charges and implement credit monitoring to protect him from further damage. "I feel so stupid," he said, as we sorted through financial documents together. "I'm a software engineer. I should be smarter than this." "Intelligence has nothing to do with it," I assured him. "Emotional manipulation targets the heart, not the head. Some of the smartest people I know have been deceived by those they loved." Despite my reassurances, I could see Thomas struggling with shame and self-doubt. He withdrew from social activities and took a week off work, spending most of his time helping me with projects around my house. A transparent excuse to avoid facing colleagues who knew about the wedding. Meanwhile, we received unexpected support from several quarters. Many wedding guests sent kind messages expressing relief that Thomas had discovered the truth before legally binding himself to Kayla. Thomas's childhood friend Marcus visited frequently, providing distraction through video games and basketball. Most surprising was Jessica, Kayla's former maid of honor, who reached out to apologize and provide additional information. We met her for coffee, where she explained that she had only recently reconnected with Kayla after working at the law firm that handled Robert's case. "I didn't know the full story until that day," Jessica admitted. "When I saw Robert and heard him call her Catherine, everything clicked. I'm so sorry I was part of her deception, even unknowingly." Jessica provided valuable assistance in untangling Kayla's financial schemes, having access to information through her legal background that helped Thomas dispute the fraudulent accounts. For my part, I struggled with guilt about the public confrontation. "I could have found a more private way to tell you," I said to Thomas one evening. "Humiliating you at your own wedding was never my intention." "You tried the private route, Mom," Thomas reminded me. "I wouldn't listen. Sometimes the truth needs to be unavoidable to be heard." Gradually, we established a new rhythm to our relationship. Unlike the controlling dynamic Kayla had falsely accused me of, I was careful to give Thomas space to process his emotions and make his own decisions. He in turn began to appreciate my wisdom and experience without feeling diminished by them. The approaching Thanksgiving holiday, what would have been Thomas and Kayla's first as a married couple, loomed as a potential emotional hurdle. Instead of dwelling on what might have been, we decided to create new traditions. Thomas invited several friends who didn't have family nearby, including Jessica, whose professional insights had proved invaluable. in resolving the legal aftermath of Kayla's deceptions. As autumn turned to winter, I watched my son slowly heal from his heartbreak and embarrassment. The Thomas who emerged was more thoughtful, more cautious, but also more authentic than the man who had been under Kayla's influence. He began reconnecting with old friends she had alienated him from and rediscovering interests he had abandoned for her. One evening, as we worked together preparing dinner, Thomas looked up from chopping vegetables and said simply, "Thank you for saving me, Mom. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't been brave enough to stand up that day." His words healed something in me that had been broken since that confrontation, the fear that in protecting my son, I might have lost him forever. 1 year after the wedding, that wasn't Thomas and I sat on my deck enjoying the June sunshine that once again brightened the day that would have been his first anniversary. So much had changed in 12 months. "I got the promotion," Thomas announced, sipping his iced tea. "Senior software architect, just like I've been working toward." "That's wonderful," I exclaimed, genuinely proud of his professional success. After the disaster with Kayla, Thomas had channeled his energy into his career, earning recognition for his innovative approaches to difficult technical problems. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom," he said sincerely. "Not just the financial cleanup after Kayla, but the emotional support. You never said I told you so, not even once." "That's not what mothers do," I replied simply. "Besides, watching you rebuild your life has been reward enough." And rebuild he had. After 3 months of therapy to process the relationship trauma, Thomas had slowly started dating again. Unlike his headlong rush into commitment with Kayla, he now approached relationships with healthy caution and clearer boundaries. "I had coffee with Melissa from accounting yesterday," he mentioned casually. "Just as friends, but it was nice." I nodded, careful not to show too much interest or excitement. Our new relationship dynamic involved me respecting his independence while remaining supportive. "She seemed lovely at the office holiday party," I commented. The experience with Kayla had changed our mother-son relationship in unexpected ways. The artificial distance she had created between us was gone, but so too was any unhealthy dependency. Thomas consulted me on important decisions, but made his own choices. I offered advice when asked, but respected his right to follow his own path. For my part, I had expanded my own life beyond motherhood. After decades of focusing primarily on Thomas, I had reconnected with old friends, joined a hiking club, and even started dating occasionally, much to Thomas's supportive amusement. "Mom's got a date," he had teased when I mentioned having dinner with a widowed client named Alan. "Do you need me to give him the shovel talk?" The legal aftermath of Kayla's fraud had been resolved with no financial damage to Thomas's credit, thanks largely to Jessica's assistance. Their professional relationship had evolved into a genuine friendship with Jessica, occasionally joining us for dinner or movie nights. "Have you heard anything about Kayla recently?" I asked, curious but cautious. Thomas shook his head. "Jessica mentioned she's moved to Chicago. Apparently she's using her middle name now, Elizabeth. New city, new identity, probably new targets. At least she's someone else's problem now," I observed. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "You know what I've realized this year? How rare it is to have people in your life who love you enough to risk losing you in order to protect you. I mistook Kayla's possessiveness for love, when real love, like yours, gives freedom even when it's scary." His insight brought tears to my eyes. "That's a powerful lesson to learn at your age. It took me much longer." "I've been thinking about what Dad would have done if he'd been here for all this," Thomas said, mentioning his father more easily than he once had. "He probably would have seen through Kayla immediately." I laughed. "Your father couldn't spot a manipulative person if they wore a name tag. Remember how that contractor scammed him into paying double for the deck repairs? But he would have supported whatever decision you made, just with less dramatic flair than my wedding intervention." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, I reflected on how close I had come to losing my son to someone who would have eventually discarded him after taking everything she could. The pain of that public confrontation had been worth enduring to prevent the greater suffering that would have followed. "Do you regret any of it?" I asked Thomas. Not the relationship with Kayla, but the experience itself. Would you erase it if you could? He considered the question carefully. No, he finally answered. I needed to learn those lessons, as painful as they were. I'm stronger now, more self-aware, and our relationship is healthier than it's ever been. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. That's how you know you've truly healed, when you can see the value in even the most painful experiences. The evening ended with plans for the future rather than regrets about the past. Thomas talked about his career goals, his tentative steps back into dating, and a hiking trip he was planning with friends. I shared my thoughts about possibly scaling back my work hours to travel more. One unexpected development that had brought us both joy was Jessica and Thomas's evolving friendship. While not romantic, their connection had deepened through their shared experience. Jessica's pragmatic perspective and legal mind complemented Thomas's technical approach to problems, and they had recently collaborated on developing software for detecting financial fraud, inspired, of course, by their experience with Kayla. As Thomas prepared to leave that evening, he paused at the door. You know what's funny? If someone had told me a year ago that the most painful day of my life would lead to so much good, I would never have believed them. That's the thing about truth, I replied. It hurts initially, but heals completely. Lies feel good at first, but wound us permanently. Thomas hugged me tightly. I'm so grateful for your courage, Mum. Thank you for loving me enough to risk losing me. As I watched him drive away, I felt a profound sense of peace. The storm we had weathered together had cleared the air between us, allowing a more authentic relationship to flourish in its wake. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping peace and speaking truth? Would you have done what I did at the wedding, or would you have found another way? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of mother-son bonds and standing up to manipulation resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing we can do is speak truth, even when it's painful.